62 cents per barrel. And for the OPEC basket, is the only market they're trading in green this afternoon, and it's selling for $75.74, and that's up 0.84%. That's it for market analysis. Now, before we get to our first discussion today, let's bring you this report that the federal government has put on hold the implementation of annual dues for public interest entities under the Financial Reporting Council Amendments Act of 2023. During a stakeholders meeting in Abuja, the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment announced the formation of a technical working committee to review the concerns raised by the private sector and propose solutions that aligns with Nigeria's economic interests. Helen Osamide-Akins has that report.
In 2023, the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria amended its acts, introducing significant changes regarding annual dues for public interest entities. The amendment expanded the definition of PIEs to include various private companies, concession entities, and private entities. However, these changes have sparked concerns among stakeholders who argue that the new dues may amount to double taxation and could negatively impact business operations. In response to these concerns, the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment engaged with the stakeholders to address their grievances.
The provisions of the law, people are to file their returns within 120 days of the end of their business year. A lot of our members have 31st of December as their end of financial year. What that then means is that between then and April, the 120 days will count. If they are not filing their returns within those days and making these payments, this due payment, they will be in an infraction.
This bill on gross should be avoided. Even when you borrow money, it's part of your gross. No bank will fund any project in Nigeria if they know that the money they are giving you is going to go to the taxman.
Following these discussions, the minister announced that the implementation of the annual dues will be put on hold as a technical committee will be set up to review the concerns raised by the private sector and propose solutions that best fit the country.
The private sector have asked from a range of 2 to 3 months to a range of indefinite suspension. We're not going to do that. So between at the most 60 days, we're going to set up a technical working group. And Mr. President had been briefed ahead, and he said, you know, we're a listening government and we want private sector to be comfortable. We want the economy to thrive. So this is what we're going to do, empirical work to come up with the best fit for Nigeria. We've already looked at global best practices on each side, and we come up with the best fit for Nigeria. We make the proposition, and then, of course, we have to go back to Parliament.
By engaging stakeholders and reassessing the policy, the government aims to ensure that financial regulations support economic growth rather than hinder it. The minister assured the attendees that the timeline for the pause and subsequent actions will be communicated promptly. Helen Osamide-Akins, TVC News, Abuja.
Now, a lot of developments in that meeting, and joining me to discuss the fallout and those developments is Mr. Paul Alaje. He's a partner and senior economist, SPM Professionals. He joins me live from our Abuja studios to continue this conversation. Mr. Alaje, good afternoon, and thank you so very much for joining me on this very important discussion.
Yeah, thank you so very much for having me. A beautiful afternoon to you.
Thank you. I think it's great for us to start this conversation around the role of the private sector in all of this. We've seen this back and forth with regards to this tariff from the FRCN saying it's a law and all of that. At the same time, we talk about how we can empower or enable some of these businesses to thrive. Now, what is your understanding of this law and how it affects the private sector? Maybe we started on that note.
Okay, well, the understanding I have about this law has to do with the annual due private sector are to pay to the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, FRCN, which is, of course, on an annual basis. The law was recently reviewed in 2023, and the FRCN have actually started implementing. The concerns here, they are majorly two among so many other things that the private sector, when I say private sector, I will just use two of the organized private sector bodies, Manufacturer Association of Nigeria and NECA. That's, I think, Nigeria Employer Consultative Forum. Two among others have their concerns. And when we look at the issues, we see that they have genuine case in this matter. First is the suspension, 25 million naira or 0.002% of the value of quoted company, which is to be paid as a penalty. Again, the price has also been significantly increased. So if payment is not made, the council is looking at a 10%, I beg your pardon, as penalty. Meanwhile, they are to pay 25 million as annual due or 0.002%, whichever is lower. Now, the position of Manufacturer Association and NECA will be, if this money is paid, it's going to, of course, have tremendous implication on other obligations and even help, and we also have challenge in our potential to stock. So here is it. What exactly has changed in the responsibility and the role that a Financial Reporting Council is delivering to us? Is it the money that will make them perform their role in terms of registration, regulation, and all those? Is it more money that will help them? Or this payment, is it coming as a further pain to them? Is it that they gave them access to land and the value of land has increased? Or what exactly can we tie this payment to? Now, Nigeria is not the only country where this is done. There are global best practices across board. But in looking at this, we need to look at the denominator of what Nigeria is going through even this moment today. And it's not starting now. Over the years, the Nigerian economy has been going through an interesting phase. Perhaps this is why many manufacturers, especially medium-scale manufacturers, and you have them in large numbers, very few of them are in large scale. Apart from those that are manufacturing, those that are even in service sector, we have a lot of medium scale compared to very few large scale organizations that we have. So it's important, yes, we've passed it into law. And again, this is where I have my concern in having executive orders and also having bills passed into law without having a robust private sector conversation. Look at the, what do we call it now? The tax bill that is currently before the National Assembly. I think that will be the largest number. I mean, that has the largest input from perhaps all stakeholders. Everybody got to know. We know what government is saying. And maybe because of the embodiment of the person that led the team. And I'm not surprised that that committee, Presidential Task Force, will be part of the committee the minister have announced, which of course include Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, the organized private sector, as well as member of that Presidential Tax Committee to join in coming up with what will be the better recommendation. This is very important for us to look at because when companies are discouraged from being quoted, it also has to do with the limited number of companies that is listed in Nigeria. And that's, to a large extent, it's one of the measures of wealth, of corporate wealth in the country. So it's not just to have several companies listed, hundreds of thousands of companies that we have in Nigeria registered with Corporate Affairs Commission. Many of them will never leave paper state. But those that have left and are now quoted, I think it's important for us to see a way to find a win-win for both the private sector and also the regulators in this instance.
Interesting breakdown, I must say, Mr. Paul Alaje, as always. But let's talk about the challenges that manufacturers and NECA members have faced in recent times. There was a FOB levy that was to be instituted by the Customs Service. There was also another levy, sometime 15%, I think, from the NPA, and they had to grapple with all of this, and now this is coming. My question to you really would be, how do we balance revenue-generating agencies of government and the ease of doing business initiative of government? How do we put this side by side?
I think what we need to do is to expand tax bracket right now, and if you like, charge brackets. Those that are paying, we might need to stay with possible payment other than rates that the market already indicates that the market has capacity to pay. Yeah. To increase without the capacity of market to pay, then we are doing ourselves a lot of disservice. For somebody who play in that sector, I'll tell you that how you measure it is you look at what operators are saying. For instance, if you have 5 players within a sector and 3 or 4 are willing to pay and 1 is resisting, definitely the market is willing. But when you have mostly all organized private sector saying, we do not have the capacity to pay, not just one saying this to one regulators, you see what has happened to NPA and so on and so forth. So on NPA, you have seen custom. I remember the last time I was here, we spoke about possible increase in custom rate. And I've said that most of these rates will happen. Why? We have increased the target in our budget. We have increased the target to ×2. Where do you think these persons will generate this money? They will generate it anyhow. They will generate it from private sector, from individuals and from businesses. So it is the pressure that we are seeing now. So in doing this, what do we need to do? We need to build more wealth as a nation so that new people that perhaps were not paying or they are starting their business, they can then come and we make more revenue. So those who are working representing government, agencies of government, this is where we all have that assignment to find new markets, to find new business, without necessarily astronomically increasing rates, so that people that are with us already, we can get the same revenue because, of course, there's some level of structure. But for those that are new, we can also introduce some of the charges, then make sure that the business of government does not suffer. But most importantly, when private sector has major setback, then government, of course, will definitely be affected. And this is the balance we need to have. In this case, from what I've read and see, because I followed the reports, organized private sector is not saying we will not pay. They are saying, yes, we are paying, is an obligation, but the rates are not what we can accommodate in our book, except we face a shutdown point right now.
Now that there's been a 60-day pause, a technical committee has been set up, and maybe there will be a review, maybe there would not be, because of course they're saying it's a law, and even the lawmakers are going to have an input in this one way or the other if there's going to be any review. Do you see, what is your outlook with regards to this?
Well, private sector is very critical sector.
Yeah,
in
they are.
You have different economic sector. I'm here. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I am. Go ahead, please.
Private sector has three sectors. I mean, in economics, there are several economic sectors, but but narrowly speaking, I will speak to household, firm, and government. When you look at household, where, of course, the household will work in firm. So you look at this sector of firm, interacting with government is very, very important. So if government says that, no, this is what we must achieve this moment today, then it may have implications again on business. And when businesses are no more, then definitely it will be difficult for government to raise taxes. If you look at national income computation, you know that it is from that gains from investment that we raise taxes of government, and also from individual persons that government raise taxes. So to a large extent, it's important for government. By government, I mean the Reporting Council of Nigeria, the Federal Reporting Council of Nigeria. We need to look at it. Yes, it's a law, but I think laws can be amended. I strongly believe it can be amended. And I know that I'm happy the minister mentioned that the president has already been briefed. When the president looked at the numbers for himself, I'm sure that this review will be achieved. Do I think that this will get to National Assembly? I think that's the right place where this needs to go. Do I think National Assembly needs to give this all the importance and the urgency that it requires? Yes. And I also think that if we need to extend this period, it might be important for us to extend it up until the time there is a balance for both private sector as well as the government. And where will that balance be? 25 million naira on each quoted company. It's a far cry from what the reality dictates today. And it's not just about reality dictating it today from what is obtainable today. Do we think that private sector should evade this payment? The answer is no. We strongly believe that payments should be made, but we should accommodate the reality and the books and the hits that the economy has been faced, perhaps in the last, say, charitably speaking, 10 years. Because consistently, we have been seeing the private sector performance, not thanks to global pressure. We also saw what happened during COVID, which has, of course, had tremendous impact on the entire economy. We also saw what happened when the Russia-Ukraine war started, and the impact, especially on private sector in Nigeria. We saw the price of diesel, which was one of the major inputs, surge sporadically. We also saw what inflation has done to our economy in the last 10 years, that has grown from about 12% to about 34% up until the time methodology was adjusted to give us 24 to 23, 22% that we are currently seeing. So to a large extent, to a very large extent, I must say that it's important for us to take a careful look at taking decision so that we can have a meaningful balance where both the private sector and government know that we are both going concern and we would keep existing as entities to make the overall economy perform well.
Finally, the argument of being a listening government also comes in now. Everyone says, yeah, the government is a listening government, listening to the yearnings of the private sector players and all of that. Moving forward, we are still expecting implementation of the tax reforms after it's passed into law and all of this. But do you still see the private sector still taking a big chunk of all of this support and payments and all of that to government coffers, particularly as we race to meet the revenue aspect of our 2025 budget?
Well, you recall that I had conversation with you on the tax reform, and I told you that I give tax reform a minimum of 6, a maximum of 7. To a large extent, I supported some of the items in tax reform, and the ones I did not support, I made it known to those that are lawmakers, and I'm particularly happy with the report that I saw that the House of Representatives, what was passed by the House, it reflects almost 85 to 90% of our position in our organization. It reflects it to a large extent. One, VAT should not. We have consistently maintained that VAT should not be increased because of its implication on the overall economy and its possibility to induce inflation. We are happy that the House of Representatives used that 100%. We've also made so many other recommendations. So all of this is to protect private sector, to ensure that we do not have private sector, disappear, and all of us do not just do 100% government. That handshake between private sector and government must happen. Then, as the government listen, I think so, because the private sector came up with a proposal of suspension, minimum of 3 months and maximum of indefinite suspension. But the government said we are going to suspend for 2 months, about 60 days. So that is listening right there. Yes, it might be in the first instance because we don't know what the second instance may be. So it's important for us to say, yes, government might have not done what we expect as organized private sector, but what we have seen that government have done is also from no suspension at all to some kind of 60-day suspension on this levy until the pending issues are resolved. And I strongly believe that when these issues are set up by the committee, is a straightforward thing. Very quickly, the committee comes up with their responses, and at the end of the day, we can have this go into the National Assembly, which I believe the National Assembly understands the importance of these on the private sector, and we can have a way forward. And as of that time, I think that suspension could be lifted, because it's important we correct, because there will be no basis for reduction. If you ask the National Reporting Council to now charge 5 million or 10 million, they'll say, well, the law does not say we should. So, and the presidential order cannot cancel a bill. So it's important for that to go to National Assembly before that can be cancelled. But up until that, I don't think 25 million or 0.002% of the quoted amount, whatever is listed, should be paid. As also defined, 10% of the amount, I also don't think it should be paid until we have resolved these issues. Because at the end of the day, Nigeria is ours, and it's important for us to look at the issues critically for the benefit of our people, for the greatness of our nation, and of the upliftment and our development as a nation.
Mr. Paul Alaje, partner, senior economist, SPM Professionals, thank you so very much for sharing your afternoon with us. We really appreciate this. Stay safe.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, interesting conversation as always. We'll stay with this story with FRC, and we'll follow it up tomorrow. We are still going to have a discussion around it, what the law means, what the law stipulates, and how it affects all sectors of Nigeria's economy. So stay with us. We're going to keep a tab on this very important topic of discourse. But still to come on the show today, we'll shift our focus to looking at prospects of Nigeria's agricultural sector. There's a lot around this segment, the sector at this moment, a lot of moves by government, private sector support. But I have a food security expert in the studio, African farmer Mogaji. After this break, we'll get to talk. Don't go away. This is Business Nigeria.